And as I sprinkle here, we're just going to kind of spread it nice and even around the tree. Hey guys, welcome back to another peach video. Today we're going to be talking about how to fertilize your peach trees and how to control the weeds around them. So we've been getting a lot of questions. How do we fertilize our fruit trees or our peach trees? How do we make sure that the trees are healthy and productive? And this is a really good question they have, because a lot of times the trees in their yards don't look the same as the trees down at the farm or at a farm that you drive by or farms that you've seen. Usually those trees at the farms are really healthy looking. They're all uniform. They're all productive, that you see them harvesting, and it gets you excited, wonder, well, how do I do something like that in my yard? I planted a tree, and a lot of stories we hear is it did good for a year or two, and then it started falling apart on us, and the peaches started getting really small, and the trees seemed like all the leaves started turning yellow, and parts of the tree are dying, and so all those different things start happening. They have an initial burst of success, and then as it goes on, the tree starts waning on them. There's a few things to consider that are going on with the fertilization that is causing your tree to wane, to turn willowy, to start dying back, and the growth to start being small. A good healthy growth down at the farm, we're looking for pieces that are growing 16 inches to 3 feet. We're looking for some pretty good growth every year so that we have new wood to choose from and cut out the old stuff and let the new stuff come up and regenerate. Now down at the farm, we have another problem too. Sometimes we get too much fertilization going, too much nitrogen, and we start getting growth that is 6 and 7 feet tall out the middle of the tree, and the peaches start getting so big so fast that they start splitting, and all sorts of other problems if it's over-fertilized. So there's a real balance to it. It seems like the people who have trees in their yard usually fall in the other category, where they're too short on fertilization. After a while, it gets depleted, it gets worn down. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today, but we will talk a little bit about what we do on the farm and how we can adapt that to our yard. Now today we are at the old house again, where we have about 8 peach trees up here, and these trees are about 15 years old up at this house, so they're a little bit older, and most of them are located within the yard here. So you can see all the grass around the trunks, because a lot of you guys are probably going to be dealing more with that type of a situation than what we do down at the farm. And of course, if you have driven by orchards and farms and different things, often we will have rows of trees where we spray the weeds, and we have the drip lines running down them, and we have the fertilization coming through the drip lines, or maybe we spread the fertilizer in bulk along the trees and cultivate along them, and we have strips of orchard grass or clovers or different green life that help keep everything healthy within the orchard for the bugs and everything. But obviously most of us in our yards are not going to be setting up the orchard in that type of a way. So today I really wanted to focus on how to adapt some of those things that we do on the farm, some of those principles and those techniques we use on the farm, and bring them here to our yard so that our trees can be productive on a smaller scale. But one of the first questions we would ask when we see our trees suffering or yellow leaves or some of these problems is, what do we need to do? How do we know what to do? How do we know how much fertilizer? How do we know which? How do we even know if it's a fertilizer problem or if it's a peach borer eating its way through the bottom of the tree? Anyway, so there are 2 ways we can kind of get a reading, and one is a more technical way. We could take what's called a soil test, and we'll put a picture up of some of the different soil tests we do on the farm often. We usually do them in the spring, every spring. We did a soil test up here a few years back. I don't remember how long, because some of our leaves were not looking as healthy. Some of them were curling, some of them were turning yellow a little bit. And we found out that we had a zinc deficiency up here from the soil test. So we were able to address that and carefully add a little bit of zinc to the mix. And it seemed like it put everything in order for these trees. They did really well after that. So a soil test is usually available from your local extension services, for your government agencies, your county at your county offices or even at the colleges. And sometimes they even have independent ones that just do it because you're in a farming community. But whatever the case, you could, research that online where you could mail a soil sample. They'll tell you how to do it, and you mail it over to them, and they'll send you the results back. It's pretty easy, and it's usually pretty inexpensive, and it's a good way to get a feel for what's going on with your ground. Now, the second way to kind of get a feel for what's going on with your tree is to read the tree. Now, this one is not as easy for people to do because they don't always know what it is they're looking for. But there's a lot of different things that can be happening. And if you have your soil test and you're understanding a little bit about the tree, those two together should give you a pretty good idea of what you could do to get your tree back in shape. I'll tell you a story on this particular tree. Now, this tree was planted 15 years ago, and I did this early on when I had first started our farm, and I didn't know what I was doing as much back then. So when I bought this tree, it was already pruned up high, and it had kind of a skinny trunk on it here. And even after 15 years, you'd say, well, that trunk still isn't very big. It's just the way this tree is. And what had happened is on this tree is that it was doing really well at first, had lots of growth up here, and it got big and bushy, and it got going to town. As the peaches started coming on, and maybe they were just like a thinning size, where they were the size of a 50-cent piece. As they were starting to get going and starting to pull from the tree because they're starting to produce the fruit, the leaves on the tree started turning yellow, and they started getting really bright yellow. They were starting to, some of them were even starting to shed. They were starting to fall off and die as if it was fall. We harvested the peaches, and they were good size. The tree did a lot of work on producing those. And just a few weeks after the peaches came off the tree and the load was lightened, the leaves all started recovering, and they all started looking greener again. And so one of the things that was happening on this tree, a thing called constriction. So this tree had been pruned badly from the beginning, and all of the different scaffolds were all grouped in here in kind of a mess. And we had over time pruned it a little bit better to help it through there, but it has always had kind of that trouble of constriction. So it's really important that your tree has good circulation. And so one of the first ways we can improve the circulation of the tree so that it can pull all the nutrition out of here, we've got to prune this tree correctly over time to help it have good circulation and good conduits to send all the fertilization and the food and the energy and all the water and get it up to the areas where it's doing all the production up in. But we're also helping to control the load that the tree will bear during the season. So for example, a healthy, good pruning, we're cutting out between 50 to 70% of last year's growth. And we're picking and selecting what we want, but 50 to 70%. And then we even come along a second time and we thin the peaches so that there's a peach every 5 to 6 inches. Again, goes back to the pruning. So here is another way to get a little bit of a reading on your tree, what might be happening with it. And this one pertains more to nitrogen. And as many of you may already know, the nitrogen has a lot to do with the greenery growth, the top growth, and the vegetative growth on the tree. You will notice that a lot of the growth is very short and stubby. And so what this is telling me is that the tree is on these areas is not getting very good nutrition. Doesn't have very much to work with to grow very much. Now there could be a few reasons for that. One of the reasons I would suggest to begin with is that the tree itself is competing with all this heavy lawn down here that is in our yard. And again, at the farm, we would not have that problem. It'd be bare dirt, or it might be even mulches, or it might be some different things. But we wouldn't so much have a mat of grass there eating all the stuff competing with the tree. My dad, every spring, fertilizes with the white grass fertilizer. And of course, the tree gets a little bit of that every year too, along with the lawn. But it doesn't seem like it's enough to help this tree very much. because the tree is a lot bigger unit here than those little blades of grass. So it takes a little bit more nitrogen to keep it going. In an area on a tree like this where we're having a brand new growth that was growing last year, and it has a shoot up here that is 4 feet long. This is more of a medium to heavy growth and is something that we can work with and we like. When we have too much nitrogen going on, too much fertilizer, sometimes these growths will be 6, 7 feet, 8 feet tall into the air, and we have a huge trunk to prune off the coming year. So on the one hand, we want to make sure our tree is fertilized, but we don't want to overdo it. Otherwise, it makes our life a lot tougher on having to do way more pruning, and even the peaches start getting too huge and they start splitting and exploding. So now another reason your tree could be waning and having yellow leaves and some of the areas of it dying is we just did a video recently on cutting down this tree right here that used to be here, and it had severe peach borer damage on it. And so if you went down by the tree, it was oozing sap, and half the bark was missing, and there was white little worms in it that are peach borer. Areas on the tree that were dead, areas last summer that were yellow, and it had a lot of strife going on with it. So that's another thing to consider if your tree is having bad health. We're gonna talk about the weed control, because remember those other trees, they're having to compete real heavy with the sod, the grass. But one of the things we're going to do is we're going to put mulch around these trees today. Number one, it's going to kill off all the competition around the tree, and it's going to keep those areas weed free. And when it kills it all, it'll turn it into green manure. So you'll have an instant nitrogen boost to your tree because it'll start eating the weeds that were formerly causing it trouble. The next thing it does, it invites a lot of good bugs into the area. And some people even suggest that it helps keep the peach borers at bay to have some mulch there. They don't like it as much. I haven't found that to help too much. The peach borers still seem to show up. Another wonderful benefit of the mulch is that in time, over the years, it slowly breaks down and turns into nitrogen. And it kind of turns everything black around your tree, really rich. It richens the soil there. Now, it takes a little time for these things to all happen, but the trees kind of like it that way. They seem to like something that gives them a slow release, a nice steady diet. They don't like drinking a big can of soda pop that makes them go crazy and then they don't have any food left. The mulch helps to do that for them. Another nice thing about the mulch is that it makes it easy for us to dress the tree with fertilizer. We can rake the mulch back and it opens up bare ground where the fertilizer can be spread and the mulch can be covered back over, and it helps that fertilizer to break down a lot quicker. And the tree is able to pick that up pretty quick and utilize that. Another wonderful benefit of the mulch, especially if you're in hot, dry areas like Arizona or Las Vegas or somewhere like that, is that the mulch actually shades the ground around the tree. And it acts like a blanket in that way, where it shades it and helps keep the moisture up, where the tree can have that at its disposal. On the same merit, it acts like a blanket where it helps the tree keep its little toes warm during the winter. And so it just helps everything have a nice system to it, and it makes it more manageable. So we're here picking up mulch right now at Lowe's, and we have a bunch of different selections here. We even have right behind us over here all the different colored barks, black and red and dyed brown and all sorts of things, but we don't really want the dyed ones. And the one I like to go with, especially in our yard at home, is the one that says small bark nuggets on the bag. And part of the reason for that is that they break down a little faster and help fertilize the tree a little bit faster. But the other reason is we're running the lawnmower around it. And when I have something like these big chunks in the medium bark over here, although that might be a good solution for over at the farm, it's going to hold up a little bit longer and break down even over a longer period of time. And these ones you might have to replace, every other year. When the lawnmower hits those, it's not too bad, but when it hits a big chunk, Well, you know what that's like when you hit something big with the lawnmower, so it's not too pleasant. So with that being said, the mulch sounds like something we should be doing. So I'm going to get right after it here, and we're going to lay on these 3 trees, these 3 bags of mulch around them. So what I'm going to do, take my razor knife and cut it in the middle. I like to do that because it makes it really easy to get the mulch out of the bag. You just flip it side like that, and it comes out a lot easier than having to pour it out one end. So we'll kind of take the mulch now and push it around there. Boy, it sure smells good too. This is really fun to do the mulching here, at least for the first 100 trees. After that, you know, like anything else, makes your neck start to hurt. Often they will suggest that so much mulch that it will go out to the cover the whole rim of the tree, which if I did, it would come out here a whole another 8 feet almost, 6 to 8 feet. But we're not going to do that. We're going to be within reason here because we're up at the yard and we still want to have grass in the yard. We don't want the whole yard to be a mulch patch, but this should be adequate enough to get the tree all that it needs and still make it look good. Hey, you know what? Maybe that's another benefit of mulch. I think it looks good. I'm building the hump up here kind of thick because the mulch is going to settle as it rains and as it gets cold and gets hot during the mornings, and it'll kind of squish all together and settle, and it'll sink into the ground. Some of it will start rotting a little bit, and the bugs will come in here and start making their homes and move it around a little. So what I want to do is I want to get it about, right now it's like 8 inches thick. I want it to be about 5 or 6 inches thick is just fine. But 8 inches is fine too. If you want to leave it like that, you can almost spread it out as much as you would like. Now you don't want to get it too thin. You don't want to get out here where it's just 2 inches deep because then your weeds will come back up through. So we want to have it deep enough that the majority of the weeds get squished and start getting killed so they can start feeding the tree. So we got the mulch all done on these 3 trees and they're already looking like $1,000,000. But some of them might need some extra fertilizer. So let's go look at some fertilizers and what we could do to enhance the trees even more. There's a lot of fertilizers you can get. Obviously, it can get a little overwhelming at the store. Some of the fertilizer we got is our 10-10-10 all-purpose planting and growing food. You're going to usually see 3 numbers on them. And of course, these 3 numbers give you an indication of what these are capable of providing for you in fertilizer terms. So this first number represents nitrogen. And so this one's kind of an even mix. It's 10% the nitrogen, 10% phosphate, and 10% of the potash. So the nitrogen is really focusing on that top growth a lot, and everything that goes on above ground, your vegetative growth, the size of your leaves, the greenness of those leaves. The second number is the phosphate, and that's focusing a little bit more underground on all the root development and all the things that are setting up that part of the tree. Now, the trees in general like kind of a nice mix of everything. Like us, we like to have a lot of variety when we have Thanksgiving dinner. We want stuffing and mashed potatoes, turkey and string beans. I don't know, whatever you like, but the fruit trees are a lot like that too. They like to have a nice balance amount of food. These two don't really contain much in the mineral department, such as zinc or iron or manganese, magnesium. But this 10-10-10 mix has kind of a mix of all those, the calcium and the boron and the iron and the manganese and the zinc. It has kind of a nice mix of a little bit of everything. And so the tree needs a little bit of those too. Let's say that your soil test comes back and you have a deficiency in boron. Well, usually they're not going to sell you straight concentrated boron over at Lowe's or Home Depot. So you might have to go get some of that from a little bit more of a farming store or a specialty supplier that maybe they do landscaping, or anyway, you might have to go search that out a little bit. You probably could even order it online, whatever it is you need. Although I would just caution you to be careful on the metals and those minerals, because they can easily poison the ground too if you get too much on there. If you've ever heard of the Bonneville salt flats, they have a little bit too much salt out there and nothing grows. So you just want to be careful you don't overdo it on those minerals, and that's why they're giving you such a small amount, little trace elements of those, because like humans, we don't consume too much of those, but we need them. They're essential, but we don't need them in huge amounts. We also got some blood meal, which is a 1400, and some bone meal, which is a 2170. So the blood meal kind of has a more extreme mix towards the nitrogen, where it's a 1400. So it's hitting hard on that if you have a lack of nitrogen, whereas the bone meal is hitting hard on the phosphate if you have a serious lack of that in your soil. These ones especially are more of a slow release. The trees, they appreciate that slow release because they're using it all year round, and they're kind of that's the nature of them. They're here all year and they're eating all year, just like we are. A little bit different than maybe say a tomato plant or even a corn plant that grows a corn cob. They're going to town for a couple months and that's it for them. It's kind of a burst. But these guys are here all year with us, and they're working on their stuff all year long. I know we only see the peaches for a month, but it's more of a long-term program, and we're growing the trees. So for today, I'm probably not going to need to focus so heavy on the blood meal or so heavy on the bone meal. The trees are not so out of balance. I think I'm just going to give them a nice balanced fertilization. So the next question is, well, how much? The old saying goes, when in doubt, read the bag. And it tells us right on here all the different variations: planting a vegetable garden, a single vegetable plant, single shrub, a tree, of these different scenarios. It looks to me like we fall under this category, so that would be a cup and a half of fertilizer for a full tree. And maybe because they haven't been fertilized in a while, maybe I'll just do break even and I'll go 2 cups. I'll just give a little bit of extra. So I could have fertilized this tree before I put the mulch down, because we're going to move the mulch back in order to fertilize the tree. But I just thought it'd be nice for you guys to see how we would take a rake and just go around the tree and kind of pull the mulch back in a circle. And you see how we're kind of churning up the dirt there too as we're doing it. And we're prepping around the tree so we can put our fertilizer in there. And it probably doesn't hurt to mix a little bit of dirt with this mulch anyway. It might help it kind of get started on the breaking it down process. Now, as we come around here and fertilize, I'm going to do 2 cups. So I'm going to load up my first cup there. And as I sprinkle here, we're just going to kind of spread it nice and even around the tree. A lot of the tree's roots that are going to be used for producing the fruit is it has a lot of the shallower roots that are going to pick this stuff up. But we also have bigger roots that go down for the structure of the tree. But these shallow roots aren't too far from the surface, so they're going to pick this stuff up pretty quick. Okay, let's go one more scoop, and then we'll close this one up. So there is just some general fertilization. We haven't done anything too extreme one way or the other. It's just generally done. And we're going to put the mulch back now and let the mulch go to work and bring in some nitrogen as well. And hopefully by this summer now, putting on the fruit heavy, this stuff will have broken down by then, because we're at the beginning of March. You know, this stuff is a little bit more long haul. So over the months, it's going to break down and feed the tree through the whole growing process. And if we do it this way, we don't have to come back and fertilize so often. The tree doesn't really like being fertilized right as it's trying to put on fruit. It's like somebody trying to give you a drink of water as you're sprinting. You know, it's hard. You're going so fast, the water's going to spill all over you because it can't take it at that time, at least not very well. And if you try to do that, sometimes that even causes trouble with the peach, because it gives them a big surge of energy, and they split and they go crazy on you. So in my experience, it's nice for the trees to get a more balanced, slow going diet. You just close it back over. So this tree is fertilized and ready to go for the seed. It didn't take too much to do that, and it don't take too much if you do it right. We don't need to go crazy and dump a 50-pound bag of fertilizer right underneath the tree. In fact, it might poison the tree. So maybe the last question you might ask about fertilization at this point would be, when do we do it? Well, I like to do it around the beginning of March, end of February, depending on how bad your winter is. It's probably more like in March that we would do this, at least here where we're at. But I like to do it around that time that we're pruning, because I want to give time for that fertilizer and the mulch and all the stuff to start working all together in combination and start feeding that tree slowly, so that by the time the tree starts putting on fruit in May and June, and the fruit starts growing, it already has access to the food that it needs, and it can finish out its season. And then we can come back again next spring and give it more food, depending on how much it used. So what do you know, guys? It's starting to rain out here now that we just fertilized, and that is impeccable timing, apparently, because now it's going to help all that stuff start the process, and also water the tree while we're at it. But I want to thank you guys for coming on another journey with us to fertilize these trees, and thank you for subscribing. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers here, and we never thought it would even do that. So thank you guys, and we'll see you on the next video.